Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am the founder of True the Vote, a national nonprofit initiative to protect voters' rights and promote election integrity. I'm here today because I was targeted by this government for daring to speak out. I'm one of the thousands of Americans who have become, sadly, living examples of this kind of trickle-down tyranny that is actively endorsed by the current administration and rigorously enforced by the Department of Justice. Over these past few years, the Department of Justice has made their presence very well known in both my personal and professional life. Since filing for tax exemption with the IRS in 2010, my private businesses, my nonprofit organizations, and I personally have been subjected to more than 15 instances of audit, inquiry, or investigation by federal agencies, including the IRS, OSHA, ATF, and the FBI. All of these inquisitions began only after filing applications for tax exemption. There is no other remarkable event or rationale to explain how for decades I went unnoticed by the federal government, but now find myself on the receiving end of interagency coordination into and against all facets of my life. I shared that same timeline as a part of testimony given in February of 2014 at a hearing before the House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee. Time did not permit then, nor does it now, to give a full account of the cast of characters and confluence of events that fill a binder with over 800 pages worth of government subterfuge. But in one way or another, the Department of Justice has found its way into almost every aspect of my story. In my attorney's testimony at last year's House hearing, she spelled out for the committee why we believed that the Department of Justice investigation into the IRS targeting scandal was, in fact, a sham. Within hours of her filing, she received a phone call from the Department of Justice, now suddenly wanting to interview me. It was the first time we had been contacted, and approximately 9 months after the investigation had purportedly commenced. An arrangement was made with the Department of Justice Public Integrity Division, but we were then told that the Civil Rights Division would also be participating in my interview. Now, this is significant because at the time, that same Civil Rights Division was fighting against True the Vote in a courtroom back in Texas, trying to prevent us from becoming an intervening party for the state in voter ID litigation that the Department of Justice had brought against them. The DOJ told my attorney that unless I was willing to waive my rights and obligations to the involvement of the Civil Rights Division, that they would not interview me at all. And to date, they still have not. A handful of months later, we met the Department of Justice in court again, this time as they represented the Internal Revenue Service in a lawsuit True the Vote filed against the IRS in 2013. The DOJ assured the judge that there was no more evidence that could be recovered from any of the hard drive crashes that had befallen IRS employees named in our suit. All of the contents from all of the hard drives was certainly and irrevocably lost. This purported dead end in discovery went on to become a factor in the judge's ultimate decision to dismiss our case. Yet just 1 month later, the Treasury Inspector General's investigation turned up an additional 2.5 million emails, of which 30,000 were lowest learners. Is there the will to ever get to the truth behind this nightmare of citizen targeting? For 6 years, the Department of Justice has operated as an increasingly rogue agency where preservation of personal liberties runs a distant second to preservation of political power. Will this new leadership be any different? As the leader of a voter rights organization, I was extremely disappointed to hear Mrs. Lynch comments in a speech she made in Los Angeles last February, when she said that voter ID laws were passed in the Deep South so that, and I quote, minority voters would be disenfranchised. And further, that she applauded DOJ's lawsuits filed against those states having ID programs and promised that those lawsuits would continue. 70% of Americans believe that showing identification in order to vote is a common-sense safeguard to our electoral process. Should we count on continued resistance from a Department of Justice led by Loretta Lynch? In fact, the most significant voter disenfranchisement threat currently facing our country was made possible by the President's recent order of executive amnesty. States are not prepared to deal with the coming influx of illegal aliens wanting social service programs like Medicaid, welfare, and, of course, driver's licenses. Federal law requires that these programs offer voter registration opportunities, which is a wonderful thing for American citizens. But these programs were not designed to verify citizenship, leaving many states without the necessary firewalls to ensure that non-citizens do not end up as registered voters. And every vote cast by a non-citizen disenfranchises the vote of a citizen. We know Mr. Holder is a proponent of amnesty. Where will Ms. Lynch stand on the issue? In a 2009 speech, General Holder called America a nation of cowards. Well, if you remember nothing else from my comments, please remember this. I am not a coward, and I'm not a victim. I'm a messenger for all of those Americans who love our country, love our fellow countrymen, and pray for a better tomorrow. And I'm here to say our country right now is at a tipping point. We have replaced rule of law with moral relativism. We have replaced truth with political correctness. And in all of the double-speak and double-think, we have become increasingly unsteady about how we, the people, factor into a future left into the hands of our current leaders. So please be bold. Please choose wisely, because America is watching.